Will they learn algebra today? Let's find out. Very doubtful. Holy moly, you got 3 times in a row. It said you would learn algebra, this time not, but we're going to prove them wrong. Hello, everybody. What is the game plan today? Let's read it together. It says, hello, young grasshoppers. Let's explore a quadratic function. And it is this g of x equals x squared. So what does it mean to be quadratic? The highest exponent is 2. Now we're going to see what the graph looks like and what we can learn about it. So what would I like you to do? First, fill in the table below, right? Make sure you have your calculator. It says fill in the table below. 2, after you fill in the table, predict what you think the graph of g of x will look like based on your points, right? So what we're going to do is we're going to fill in the table, then you're going to predict just by looking at your table what will the graph look like, right? And then what you could do is you could graph and sketch the points to see if you're correct, and on the next page you'll see some questions that we'll answer together, right? So let's do this. Let's fill in the table, right? So let's explore over here. Let's get the camera angle nice and neat. Holy moly. So what do you notice? You have x, you have g of x equals x squared, you have the g of x, and then this is where we put our points of x and y. So if I have x is equal to -3, how will I fill in the table, right? So what happens here? I have g of x, or this is going to be g of -3 is equal to, right? What am I going to put for the next one? G of -2, and so on and so on, right? And now what does this mean? Anywhere I see x, what am I going to do? Replace it with that -3, right? So what we could do is we'll put our parentheses over here, and then I'll put in -3 squared. Right? What should the next one be? Parentheses, -2 squared, right? And you just keep going down, right? So take your time, take your time, take your time. What should the rest of the table look like? All right. So notice, what are you going to do with every number? You're going to square it. So what does it mean to square a number, right? So if I take the number, let's say 2, and I want to square it, right? So like, let's look at this one over here. Let's look at g of 2 equals 2 squared, right? So then what does that mean I need to do? Anything that's inside the parentheses, I'm going to show it twice. So this will be 2 times 2, which is 4. What if I wanted to do g of 3? Right? This will be 3 squared, which is just 3 times 3, and that is 9. Right? So take your time and try and complete this. And if you need to use the calculator, you can use the calculator. So notice that this should be 4, this should be 9. Right? What about this one? How can I use the calculator to finish this out? So if I were to look here, and remember, be very careful, it should be parentheses, -3, close, right? And then where's the square button? Here. And notice that you get 9, right? So it should be 9. And right? Because what is negative 3 times negative 3? Negative times negative is positive. 3 times 3 is 9, right? Okay. So take your time, pause the video, try and fill in the rest of the points. What do you get? What do you get? So what should it be? This should have been 4, 1, 0. It has a nice little pattern, right? It has a nice little pattern. So then what did we create? We created points, right? So this should be negative 3, 9. Negative 2, 4. Negative 1, 1. 0, 0. 1, 1. 2, 4. 3, 9. All right. Great. So what we did was we did part 1. So this is a check. And you get a happy face. Now, what is it asking you for part 2? After you fill in the table, predict what you think the graph of g of x will look like. So notice that these are the points. What do you think the picture of this will look like? Pause the video. Can you guess what the picture will look like? Will it look like this? Will it look like this? Will it look like a circle? Will it look like a square? You know, what will the picture look like? Okay. So after you're guessing, then let's actually graph the points, right? Let's graph them. So let's take a look here. Where is my first point? It should be negative 3, 9. So that should be, this is negative 3, and this is 9. Boom, that's a point. What's my next one? Negative 2, 4. That's a point. Negative 1, 1. That's a point. 0, 0. That's a point. 1, 1, 2, 4, and then 3, 9. Very interesting, very interesting. How can I connect the points? If you try to draw straight lines, it's a little incorrect. The lines will not be straight. Instead, it should have this curve to it. It should look like this. It'll have a curvature to it, just like that. And then we did it, chat. This is x squared, right? We call this U-ish shape, this U shape, it's called a parabola. All right. This U shape is called a parabola. So great. So we did the first part. We did the second part. We did the third part. Then on the next page, we're going to answer some questions about this. So turn the page and notice that you should have something like this. Let's take a look. Let's take a look. So here it says, notice that you only use the x values from negative 3 to positive 3 within the table. So what does it say? So if I look at this table over here, what were the only x values you used? You only used everything from negative 3 to 3. So is the domain restricted to just these x values? So can I only use these numbers for the domain? Can I plug in 4? Can I plug in 5? What do you think the domain of x squared will be? So pause the video and try and answer this question. Try and answer this question. Can I only use everything from negative 3 to 3? Can I use other x values? Well, let's say you tried it by yourself. Well, can I say, remember, like if g of x is equal to x squared, can I say g of 4? What is g of 4? Well, that's 4 squared. What's 4 squared? So what did I create? X equals 4, y equals 16, right? So am I allowed to use x equals 4? 100%. Where will that point be? It'll be somewhere 4 and then 16 is somewhere here. So notice that it like continues that pattern up. So notice that when you're talking about the domain, what is the domain? What is the domain? The domain is all my x values, right? Domain is all possible x values. How far left, how far right? Well, can I keep going with the graph? Can my graph keep going left? And you see how it was -1 is here. When x is -2, it's here. When x is -3, it's here. When x is -4, notice that the pattern keeps going. So how far left does the graph go? -infinity. How far right is my graph going? +infinity, right? So then this is my domain. The domain will be from -infinity to +infinity, and then how should I show it as a set? Open and closed. That is the domain. I can use any x value I want. I can use any x value I want. So let's write that. I can use any x value I want. Notice the y values you received were all positive, right? Let's go to number 2. So for the first one, we talked about domain. The second one, it looks like we're going to talk about the range. So let's read it together. It says number 2, notice the y values you received were all positive values. Is it possible to receive a negative value for y for any value of x you plug into x squared? So what is this saying? Let's read it again. Is it possible to receive a negative value for y? Because what did you notice that, what were all my y values? They were positive. So let's take a look. You see here, these g of x's are my y values. Notice all my values are positive. And notice the graph. You see how these are all my y values? What do you notice about the y values for the whole entire graph? They're all positive. Now what is the question saying? Is it possible to receive a negative y value? Is there any way we could have a point that's like below the x-axis? And it's for you to think about, right? It's for you to think about. So pause the video. Can you get a negative y value? And if you can't, why can't you? Why is it impossible to get a negative y value? Well, if I have some x squared, right? Give me any number, because notice, what's a positive times a positive? That's positive. What's a negative times a negative? That's a positive. So no matter what number I plug in here, if I multiply that number times itself, it gives me a positive number. So all my answers for y must be positive. I'm never going to get a negative value for y if the function is x squared. So now the big question is, what's the range? If domain is how far left, how far right, range is what? Low to high. So what is my lowest y value? What is my highest y value? Okay, my lowest y value is 0, and my highest y value, notice the graph keeps going up and up and up. All right. Very nice, everybody, very nice. Is it a function? Why or why not? Check with it visually. So what I'd like you to do is try this on your own, because right now I'm running out of time and I got to teach my next class. But the game plan is, here, notice that we did x squared. right? We did some quadratic. And notice that the graph of a quadratic has this U-ish shape, or what was the name of it? A parabola. Now the game plan is, well, what happens if instead of x to the 2, I have x to the 3? What happens if it's cubic? What does the graph look like? What can you say about the domain and range? And notice you have the table, right? And my bad, this should be an h over here. So what I'd like you to do is try and explore this on your own, the same way we did before with x squared, but notice now the exponent is going to be a power of 3. You could do it. And one tiny little hint, you see how before I did negative 3 squared? How would I do negative 3 to the 3, right? Because this is going to be h of negative 3. What do I do with the calculator? Well, I go like this. I first put in parentheses, then I put negative 3, close. And you saw how when you did square, you hit this button? But now look at this button. You see how does this little symbol here? Hit this button. And notice what does it do? It gives you an empty box. So you could put whatever number you want in there, and that's 3. So the first one should be negative 27. You got this.